Welcome to the SBI podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. This is Greg Alexander, CEO of SBI, a sales and marketing consulting company dedicated to helping you make your number. This is the SBI Weekly Podcast Show, and today I'm joined by Spencer Hodson. Spencer is the Vice President of Sales and Channel Strategy, Operations and Enablement at Harmonic, the world leader in digital video infrastructure. They allow broadcasters, service providers, and media companies to deliver stunning video on any screen. The company's based in San Jose, right smack in the middle of Silicon Valley, does a little over $400 million in annual sales, employs approximately 1,000 people, and has been in business for 25 years. At Harmonic, Spencer co-developed a sales transformation and operational excellence plan to drive consistent double-digit profitable sales growth. He has 25 years of business experience, highlighted with a 13-year successful run at Cisco Systems, where he was responsible for sales strategy, planning, and operations. And lastly, he received his undergraduate degree from Cornell, so he's no dummy, and an MBA from Rutgers. Boy, talk about the contrast method. What was it like moving from Cornell to Rutgers?
Actually, I was originally a New Jersey boy, so the transition went fairly well.
Very good.
That's good.
Yeah. All right, so today's topic is sales strategy development, which is right up your alley, Spencer. When this show airs, our audience will be heads down in the annual strategic planning process. So our objective for today's discussion is to give them some things to think about when developing the sales strategy for 2016. We're going to use SBI's 5-step sales strategy methodology to guide our conversation, not because we think it's the best one in the world, but we're doing so because we want to stay focused and keep this to 30 minutes instead of 3 hours. So we want to structure the conversation and not go down any rat holes. Before we jump into this, it's important to note that our jumping off point, so to speak, so we don't confuse everybody, is as such. So strategic planning for the new year typically follows this sequence. There's some type of market research that's done, which leads to corporate strategy being determined by the CEO and the board, which usually cascades to product strategy or product roadmap, then leads to marketing strategy to drive demand, and then a sales strategy to convert that demand to revenue. And then, of course, underlying all that is a talent strategy. How many people do we need? What type? What's the organizational model, et cetera? All right, so with that out of the way, here's just a real brief overview of our 5-step sales strategy methodology, and then I'm going to get Spencer to help me dive into each one of these one at a time. So the first step in sales strategy development is planning. And this is the annual sales plan that lays out all the assumptions. So we're going to get 30 million from this market, 60 million from that market, and so it goes. That leads to engagement, which defines how the sales team will engage with customers and prospects, literally the engagement model. That cascades to organizational design. So here we want to make sure that the org structure is set up for success and we have a proper headcount allocation. That leads to execution, which is usually two things, sales ops and sales enablement. And then lastly, there's support, which is internal processes that make a company easy to do business with and make a company easy to sell for. All right, so let's pull Spencer in and ask him how he uses, some version of this or his own version regarding sales strategy development as part of the annual planning process at Harmonic. So, Spencer, step one, planning. So typically the CEO hands the head of sales the revenue number and the CFO the expense number and says, make it happen. So in your role as sales strategist, how do you convert company targets, like revenue goals or maybe even EBITDA goals, into sales targets, things like quotas, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a great question, Greg. I would say actually at Harmonic, because we're a bit of a smaller company, and that certainly, by the way, was a bit more the approach from my prior employer, Cisco, which is a much larger company. But at Harmonic, it's actually a fairly, we call our planning process more of a confluence. So what we do is typically around the early November timeframe, we get together, I say we being the sales, product management, marketing, finance, all the major functions get together, and we provide, I'll say, a bottoms-up singular view as far as what we see in the market, our interpretation of what we see in terms of current trending with our customers. Because we're a global company, 55% of our business comes from outside the U.S. We obviously would look at sort of regional views where we have, hot spots, cold spots, or challenging areas, and then come together with sort of a disposition or a perspective of where we think, outlook, let's say in the case of 2016, once we do this as November, or what we did in the past for 2015, we would come up with a view as far as from a top-line sort of number perspective. And then, of course, our counterparts or stakeholders in the different functional areas would, of course, kind of give their views as well. And then we bring that together in a 2 to 3 day planning session in which we all get together and kind of layer, if you will, all the cards, the assumptions, and so forth on the table and try to kind of triangulate between hearing the different perspectives, getting the different views, and zeroing in on, where we think we have alignment and where we think we don't. We dig in further and perhaps even go off into teams to rationalize and reconcile, the differences, and then come back with, I think, an answer that we're all pretty comfortable with. And that is one typically that we'll settle on with, let's say, over, probably be about 3 to 6 weeks after that session. Certainly towards the end of December, we'll lock in.
Okay. So I guess my first question is, and I understand that in a smaller company, and Harmonic compared to Cisco is a smaller company, but it's not as if you're a startup. I mean, you're still a substantial organization there at $400 million. When I hear doing this in November, my first instinct, and I'm sure there's a reason for it, is, boy, that's kind of late in the cycle. And then you end up ruining Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's because you're rushing to get everything done before January 1. So how do you pull it all off if you start in November?
Yeah, I guess I should qualify that. November is the time frame in which we're getting together. By that point, we've already kind of done our homework from a stakeholder perspective. So we're actually more or less kind of starting that work, I would say, in the latter half of September. We're on a fiscal quarter, and so generally September we're pretty focused on closing out third quarter, and then say early October is where we'll really start looking at some of the planning and pulling together our views and perspectives, agreeing within even the sales units. That's the unit that I work with, and getting the perspectives from the different regional vice presidents, and also gathering the data and assimilating that, so that as we come into November, we have a pretty good line of sight as far as from a sales perspective what we see in the market, and then we bring that forward in our Confluence meeting in early November. Okay, very good. The other stakeholders are doing the same. So I guess I maybe misspoke. I'd say that process for everyone is really beginning sort of that early or late September, early October time.
Yeah. Okay, very good. That makes a lot of sense. A question I have regarding, level of complexity based on a company's size or complexity of the business itself. It's easy for these strategic planning sessions to get out of control. But it's also just as easy, to oversimplify. And sometimes we see our clients, breaking sales targets down by market segment or customer type or product category, region, or maybe even by sales team. So what degree of, granular detail do you believe in?
Well, we certainly will do all that. We do look at by product family, and that's certainly the view that our respective product stakeholders would take a view on as well. Naturally, we'll also look at from a geography perspective, and so we have 5 different regions, if you will, and within that even sub-regions that we'll have a point of view on, and frankly, we'll have a lot of historical averages as well, right, in terms of how we've been trending from a bookings and revenue standpoint. That really kind of comes into play as well. And then we'll look at, from our newer technologies, particularly where we may not have quite the same trending history, where do we see the customer interaction really picking up? Where do we see, pilots, demos, some of that sort, and then help kind of play that in. So we will take a look at it both from a geographical perspective, from a market segment perspective, and then from a product family perspective. Okay, so kind of 3 legs of that stool. That seems about right. Okay. Yep.
All right, very good. We're going to take a quick break here. If you're enjoying this podcast, you're going to love SBI TV, which is our monthly television show. If you're not familiar with it, here's some more information on SBI TV. You are watching SBI TV. This is a monthly web TV show featuring guests just like you, executives trying to grow their revenues. Each month, you can peek behind the scenes and watch your peers discuss their strategies for how they make their numbers. You are not going to want to miss this. Welcome back, everybody. This is Greg Alexander, CEO of SBI. This is the SBI Weekly Podcast. Today we are talking with Spencer of Harmonic. And Spencer is a sales strategist, and he leads strategic planning or supports the sales team in strategic planning. And that's what we're talking about today. It's how to set yourself up for a big year in 2016. We're going through SBI's 5-step sales strategy development process. We just completed planning. We're going to jump into step 2, which is engagement. This usually includes 2 things, prospecting and opportunity management. So think of these as processes, prospecting process and a process to manage your opportunities. Spencer, at Harmonic, does your sales team, do they have a formal prospecting methodology used by the sales team and channel partners to generate their own leads? Or is it kind of each individual person does their own thing?
It's a little bit of both. In other words, we certainly encourage our respective sales teams, and by the way, they also manage in the territories, in their regions, work with their channel partners respectively, to understand their markets and to provide that in their go-to-market plans, which is a key part of our strategic planning. Also involves our go-to-market plans, identifying customers, the market segments where they believe they see opportunity for the forthcoming year, and how. And what their go-to-market strategy is, whether it's a direct model, whether it's indirect, or even a co-sell if we're looking with strategic partners, et cetera. So where they need help, of course, we have a marketing team that helps not only align where we think there's available TAM to them, these different customer segments, but also from a demand gen perspective. Obviously, this is a continuous cycle, so it's while we start the planning for the next fiscal year, as you suggest, in the fall, keep in mind that we're also executing on the different plans from the current year and assessing and evaluating, how well that's going. And if we are seeing some really good promising execution and output from our different demand gen programs and such, then we look at where we can either replicate that, perhaps double down and incorporate that into our planning as well. Yeah, okay. And much of that also is in the prospecting and qualifying opportunities.
Okay, very good. So as it relates to the first step in the engagement stage, prospecting, it sounds like there is a method that everybody follows. You also allow them to do their own thing, and then they're getting quite a bit of support from the marketing team. So there's a very clear strategy formulation there. All right, let's move to the second thing that happens in engagement, which is opportunity management. Some people call this a sales methodology or a sales process, and this is a lead's been qualified and been converted to an opportunity. Now we got to win it. And companies that have a formal sales process usually outproduce those that don't in 3 critical metrics. So their win rates are higher, their deal sizes are bigger, and their average sales cycle length is shorter. Do you all have a formal opportunity management / sales methodology there at Harmonic?
We do. In fact, actually, that was one of the first things that we incorporated when we came in as far as our multi-year sort of sales transformation was, in fact, to establish, first of all, our selling process and a sales playbook. Along with that, with the help of a consultant, the Taz Group actually, and we're using their methodology. In fact, their software capability, DealMaker within Salesforce, to actually help us standardize our selling process and our qualifications or process universally and worldwide. And we took them through a pretty rigorous training exercise last year when we adopted this, and used this on an ongoing basis when we do deal reviews and opportunity reviews as we enter into the quarter, and certainly during our monthly forecast and pipeline reviews. Okay, great. So the sales methodology has been in place for roughly a year? About a year and a half, we introduced it, and then, of course, we've hardened it, and because it takes a lot of repetition, you're changing a lot of behaviors, particularly across the different cultures and different regions. But I would say sort of for the last year, we've really, I think, seasoned that approach, and it's been universally applied. Okay, fantastic.
Normally we measure the before and after of a project like that on three things: win rate, cycle length, and deal size. So do you have any before and after numbers on that?
Absolutely. So what we certainly have seen, and you're right, so we look at it from a deal size, win rate, as you say, and as well as number of opportunities, and then cycle time, as you mentioned. So deal size, we certainly are up on that, and that's been sort of the approach that we've taken with a lot of our demand gen, some of the things we've talked about. In terms of deal size, interesting. I think it really depends on the markets and the segments we're going after. In some areas, we've actually seen where deal sizes have indeed increased because we've taken a bit of a different focus in those markets. And some industry consolidation, customer consolidation is kind of abating some of that as well. And then, of course, win rate. And we also look at win rate from the different region perspectives as well. And we are seeing our win rates increase. And from a deal size perspective, as I mentioned, it's actually been rather mixed. In some areas, it's actually gone up. In other areas, it's gone down, but in some cases for good reason. And that is because part of the selling process and part of our forecasting acumen, we're really encouraging our sales teams to really put everything into our CRM or Salesforce. And as a result, we actually have better tracking and better visibility of all the business. So naturally, I think actually our win rates have gone down statistically, and that is because, they weren't entering all of their opportunities in there. Yeah. So I think some of that's just because we just have better transparency into the actual business.
All right, very good. It sounds like that was a successful project. Okay. All right, we're going to take another quick short break here. The new SBI magazine is out, holding up a copy of it right now. And if you're not subscribed to the magazine, you should do so. We have some great profiles on companies such as Autodesk and Iron Mountain in this edition, which I think you'll like. So here's some information on the SBI magazine.
Making your number is hard. Your problems are complex. Complex problems need complex solutions. Introducing the SBI magazine. Read in-depth stories written by award-winning journalists about how your peers have overcome their problems to make the numbers. When you need more than a tweet, social post, or blog article, turn to the SBI magazine. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com to subscribe.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is Greg Alexander, CEO of SBI. You're listening to the weekly SBI podcast series. Today, I'm talking to the head of sales strategy at Harmonic, Spencer Hodson. And we're talking about the annual strategic planning process and developing a sales strategy. We're going through our 5-step process. We're through 2 stages right now. Let's pick up on the 3rd step, which is organizational design. Everybody loves to roll out a new org chart. So, Spencer, describe your org model for us and tell the audience why you chose this particular org model.
Yeah, and just a question here, Greg, when you mention org model, are you referring in terms of our overall organization or really from a sales perspective?
Just in the sales force. So is it hunter farmer? Is it stratification? What's the model you go to market with?
Yeah, so we actually have a model in which, well, first of all, it's geography based, as you mentioned. So we have sales leaders leading each of the different regions, whether it be in the Americas, APAC, EMEA, et cetera. And then within those team structures, we have account teams that fall into different subregions, geography based, and then within those, naturally there'll be a number of folks who are more, I'll call it, territory based. They manage their territory respectively, typically through channel partners, and there'll be others that will be on named accounts, large accounts that we typically go direct. And then have a support team behind them as well that are calling on those large accounts.
Okay, so...
And then just one last thing. In supporting both of them, of course, we have an inside sales team local in the region that also helps with any lead gen conversion and also working with the different customers for smaller quoting and things like that we don't want to have AMs tie up their time with.
Okay, so the dominant design principle of the org chart in sales is geo.
That is correct.
Okay. And normally when companies choose that, they do so because they believe that the geographic proximity to the customers matters. The customers value having that local relationship. Was that the case with Harmonic, or did it just evolve naturally over time that way?
No, it's absolutely the case. We have, again, as I mentioned, we have a fairly distributed customer base. 55% of the revenues are outside the U.S., and such, and that customer base is fairly attuned and a bit specific. So we wanted to make sure that we have closeness and that intimacy within those markets and those customers aligned accordingly.
Okay. And I didn't hear any vertical specialization or any product specialization. Why did you decide not to go that route?
We actually have a support team that's, and I mentioned this is more sales go-to-market, but we do have a support team that actually falls organizationally within our product management team that are vertical specialists, if you will, solution specialists. So they're overlay support, and they will exactly kind of provide that expertise. They're centrally located, but they provide that regionally to the sales teams as warranted.
Interesting. So product overlays sits within product management and centralized. That's an interesting approach to that. Yeah. Normally we see product overlays sitting in the sales force and they're distributed into the geos. So obviously you guys decided not to do that. What was the rationale behind that?
I think it's just looking at more from a sales expense standpoint and where do we get the greatest ROI between a quota carrier versus an overlay.
Yep.
I think naturally as you grow bigger, and certainly that was the model that I came from Cisco as well, they had that embedded because they had a much larger customer base. I could see that certainly over time as we grow that we want to bring that in-house expertise and localize that within the region.
Yep. So I think centralized product overlays works, and I advise my clients on it quite a bit, but they always push back on me. So it sounds like it's working for you.
Yeah, it is working, and say it was centralized. We do have several of those members located within the regions and supporting that. But I would say we're still it's not a large team, and we're fairly embryonic in that respect. But again, I think as we grow, I think the model that you espouse would become a little bit more apparent and probably the way we will go. Okay,
very good. All right, let's move on to the fourth step in our sales strategy development methodology, which is known as execution. And this involves really two things, sales ops and sales enablement. So, Spencer, do you guys have a sales ops team?
Yeah, actually, I run it. Yep. So part of my
I didn't know if you were a one-man shop.
Actually, yeah, well, it's I have a team of a number of folks, both from sales ops, order management, bid and proposals, deals desk, CRM support, commissions, etc.
So it's a full-blown team.
Sales.
You got a full-blown sales ops team.
We do.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. And what's the objectives for your sales ops team? What are you guys mandated to accomplish?
Our charter, quite simply, is to enable and drive sales productivity. So if that means we help grease the skids, if you will, to help the selling process become more smoother, if that means we need to look at our processes and what we're asking our sales teams in terms of conducting business, quote to cash, and those types of things. And if it's burdening them from them spending time with customers and increasing engaged selling time, then we look at how we can remove that or give them as much time as they can to spend with customers. So it's really all about how do we drive sales productivity and help and smooth out and streamline processes so they can go do that.
Fantastic. I want to point out to the audience, we in this conversation, Spencer worked at Cisco, which is a huge company, and Harmonic at $400 million is smaller than that. Yet he has a well-functioning sales ops team. He's not a one-man shop. He's got a legitimate team underneath him. And when I asked him what the objective is, he could state it to me clearly. And a lot of the people that are listening to this, even in big companies, don't have sales ops. And if they do, it's this hodgepodge of group. And when I ask them what their objective is, they really can't articulate it. What it's become is this kind of catch-all department that does everything that nobody else wants to do, which is usually not a great way to run that organization. So hats off to you guys for having a very tight execution focus inside of your company. All right, we're going to take one more short – I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Greg, I would be remiss to tell you that, that's certainly – it is a common dumping ground. I've heard from my colleagues. And naturally, there are fire drills of the day where, because of just our unique nature and some of the demands of the business, there's no proper landing spot where to handle this issue or try to resolve it. And it does find its way into sales ops. Yeah, so I think in many ways that is a testament to the value that sales ops can bring actually to a sales organization and help them with that.
Yeah, because they come to you when they need to get it done, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take one more short break. I want to draw the audience's attention to the SBI blog. This blog delivers the sales best practice that you can read on your mobile device in under 5 minutes each day. Here's some information about the SBI blog.
Each day, you receive hundreds of emails, tons of text messages, countless telephone calls, and sit in too many meetings. How do you find ideas to make the number with all this noise? The SBI blog filters all this nonsense for you and presents only first-rate ideas to make the number. Simplify your life. Subscribe to one blog and read the best content. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com and subscribe today.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is Greg Alexander with SBI. We're talking about sales strategy development as part of the strategic planning process with Spencer, who heads sales ops over at Harmonic. And so far, we're through the first 4 stages of our 5-step process. Let's get into stage 5. And this final step in sales strategy development is known as sales support. Sales support has 2 goals in our view. First is you want your customers to feel you're easy to do business with, and second is you want your reps to think it's easy to sell for you. So Spencer, let me put you on the spot here. Is your company easy to do business with?
I think so. I would say yes, with the caveat that we always have significant areas where we can improve upon. Mm-hmm. And we know that because our customers, tell us to so. But as you know, Greg, there's many different areas in which our customers relate or transact with us, whether it be on negotiating commercial terms, whether it's order and fulfillment, whether it's logistics, support, and those types of things. And so there's a number of different areas which I think Harmonic as a company excels at. And there's other areas, frankly, that I think maybe we're not on par where we need to be, and we need to improve upon that. Yeah. But all in all, I think we've done a pretty good job there.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So it doesn't take a month to get a configuration approval.
No. In fact, that's one of again, coming from a very large company to a small one. It's one of the real benefits. Just seeing how agile we are and can be, just because there's a lot less people that need to get involved to make a decision.
And if I called some of your sales reps and said, hey, is it easy to represent Harmonic? Are they easy to sell for? What would they tell me?
Oh, absolutely. I think they would tell you that, our customers feel as though that they have the support of a Harmonic, and if they feel as though that they, have an issue that they need to get resolved and it can escalate it, that we have an executive management team that is not only willing to listen, but highly engaged.
All right, very good. All right, so we're at a time limit here. We're going to wrap this up for the nice, neat package for the audience. We just reviewed our sales strategy development methodology, 5 steps: planning, engagement, organizational design, execution, and support. And Spencer was kind enough to share with us how they approach those 5 things inside of his company. Spencer, if I was to ask you to advise the audience maybe on 2 to 3 things that they should do while they're developing their sales strategy for the new year, what would you tell them to focus on?
Yeah, the first I would say is, and typically, and also I guess with my sales ops counterparts, is put yourself in the sales shoes, if you will. Many times it's easy to especially from corporate, is to have that sort of head office syndrome in which you put together great plans, you put together these different programs, and you try to push them out without really understanding what's it going to take and the impact and the burden it's going to take for sales to actually execute it into the region, and making sure there's a support team with them that can help them execute it. So one is put yourself in their shoes, and also understand what's it going to take with that support structure to really be successful in executing initiatives. I think we have always looking to be very aggressive and tend to over plan things. And when it comes down to execution, I think we may be a little bit overzealous in that as well. So being pragmatic, knowing what are the 2 to 3 things that are really going to make a difference, and focus on those. And it's all about execution. Very
good advice. So walk in the shoes of the sales team. Don't over-engineer things. Let's be pragmatic in this process. And strategic planning can get out of control quickly, so that's great advice. All right, I'm going to point the audience to 2 resources that they can rely on as they go through their planning process. So the first is I would advise everybody to download SBI's annual research report, which we just released, titled How to Make Your Number in 2016. This is the 9th year that we've done that, and it's packed on how to develop sales strategy for the new year. You can get a copy of that by going to salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016-report. And 2016 is the numerical value, 2016. The second thing I would suggest is scheduling a workshop with one of our sales strategists to apply the research findings in the report directly to your business. This is where it comes to life. And if you want one of our guys to come out and see you, go to the same website, salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016-workshop. Same URL, the only difference is one says report, one says workshop. Spencer, on behalf of our audience and personally, I learned a lot from you today. I appreciate you coming on the show and unselfishly sharing your years of wisdom with us. So thanks for being on the show.
It was certainly my pleasure.
Okay, and to our listeners, thanks for listening and tuning in. And I'm wishing you the best of luck in making your number. Take care.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.